Let's start with Vodacom. Remember, the one here, it's principally a global division, you could say, of Vodafone, a UK-based company, because they own something like 65% of it. Majority operations South Africa, but then also businesses in Tanzania, the DRC, Lesotho and Mozambique. Market capitalization 222.64 billion rands, price to earnings ratio 17, and a dividend yield of 5.31%. Let's go straight to the share chart. 5-year chart, that's what we specialize in here. So you can see it's come off a little bit, but it's actually held up pretty well. And it's really a quality operation with a dividend yield that high. It's owned by many institutional investors, and it seems to steam ahead. I mean, the data sales they've been able to report have been very good.
Very good data. Look, they have been probably the most successful in South Africa, but it's ex-growth. They've had problems in the DRC. The other two smaller operations, especially Mozambique, did quite well, but they are small in the bigger scheme of Vodacom. So Vodacom is South Africa, well-established database. They've kept their network up to date. They've spent the right amount of capex, but very mediocre growth. Very small growth. Dividends are up very marginally, although they're very safe. They're up marginally. You know, it's not exciting. That's the problem.
Although we know that the network now is tremendous. The penetration is pretty much countrywide for 4G or LTE. Kids and, in fact, just everybody are getting smartphones, so therefore their data sales really goes up and up. I mean, anyone with young children knows they can't get enough of that.
Look,
and so the sales continue going in strong, and at some point that could become the bigger part of the business.
It will be, but the problem is there's no margin on it in comparison to voice. I mean, voice, hardly anyone actually talks to anyone. And so the voice growth is very mediocre, and data growth is anywhere between 20 and 30% per year. But there's far lower margin on data. Hence, mediocre profit growth, mediocre dividend growth.
And what about specific regulatory risk here? Because with all the cabinet changes, I can't keep track anymore of who the Minister of Communications actually is right now. But there was a white paper out from the department some, I don't know, 18 months ago, which contains some really dumb recommendations about kind of nationalizing the broadband part of all of these businesses and then putting that in a sort of a successor to Infraco, or sort of merging it and then somehow promoting some sort of open access, like a really, really mad thing, considering how much has been invested, and I'm talking hundreds of billions of rands in the network historically.
Look, we assume there's going to be nothing really stupid coming out. We can we hope. But understand, clearly, access and at the right price. So they've put massive pressure for years now to bring down the interconnect fees, i.e. what you can charge your customer.
So and interconnect fees is when you take a call that originates on Vodacom, say, and you switch and connect it. So they got those lowered. But at the same time, these remain very profitable businesses. There's no question.
But I mean, they had to drop their tariffs by, Vodacom had to drop their tariffs by on average 15%. Look, the cell phone companies themselves are a little bit, I suppose, what's a favorite word of politicians? Disingenuous. They give you all of these various packages with all sorts of bells and whistles, so you can't compare one against the other and where it comes from and all of this. But their revenue, let's say their revenue per user minute, has come down quite dramatically.
Which is understandable, and yet the South African cell phone companies are a major beacon of success in an emerging market compared to our electricity service provider, which is basically bankrupt.
But at the end of the day, these guys are...
I don't have a problem as a South African that these companies have been so profitable, because at least we have a thriving, vibrant industry, and they've got enough money left over to sponsor the soccer and organize to be a social force for good.
Every person's got 1.3 cell phones already. Everyone who can talk and push a button has already got...
What about your fridge? What about your fridge and your toaster? Apparently, they also needed some
the internet of everything, and that's when we talk about telecom, we can talk about that. That's still got a way to go until your fridge becomes computerized and tells you to buy milk. You know, we still got a little bit to go on that one.
I'm not even sure it's a good thing, you know, when your fridge becomes sentient. You never know, that could be
washing machine plays up. And look, but that's still a way out. And in any case, that's all data. So your data growth is massive, but there's very little margin.
And in this country, it seems that this would be an attractive environment where quite a lot of customers would get their broadband service provision from the mobile network. Because there are other countries where there's denser populations, and therefore people could preferably have fiber.
Look, fiber is coming in. I mean, fiber's been big in Neotel. Fiber's big in telecom. Fiber is coming in, but it's to an incredibly small proportion of the population. And fiber will continue to roll out, but it's many years until fiber takes over from the data net, from the wireless networks.
And I must tell you that when you look at Vodafone's numbers, their controlling shareholder, they speak very, very favorably about the South African market. They like the dynamics here, high population, strong smartphone penetration with more space to go, plus, like not too much competition from a traditional cable type operator.
No, the cable operators obviously don't exist here.
Yeah.
But I mean, Vodacom's complaining bitterly, and they all are, about the lack of spectrum being released by government. I mean, that white paper on spectrum came
that's
out
specifically
10
about
years ago.
Fight that's going on between the government and ICASA, where ICASA wants to actually give the bandwidth and the spectrum auction and have it go ahead, but the government is soft peddling and sort of fooling about.
It's been a complete and utter disaster for I mean, I think it must be a decade now.
But again, one suspects that somehow or another they'll kind of get through.
Because ultimately they're going to take it away from the SABC to release that spectrum. I mean, that's where it comes from, and maybe that's why the government's kicking back. But there's limited growth. Look, 3G's, virtually everyone's got 3G, but 4G still, it's not complete full coverage on 4G yet, because you're running out of spectrum.
Okay, there's a lot of issues we've tabled right here, but what are you going to say about this
one?
Look,
I'll actually go hot on here. I'll go hot on here. It's not exciting, but you've got an extremely high dividend yield. Hard to match that dividend yield. It won't come under pressure, and this is not a turnaround situation, or it's a very solid, very stable company, and although it will face more pressure from MTN, it is the leader in South Africa.
Yeah, I'm going to go hot on this one too, because I think in the end of the day, all of these government initiatives won't come to anything. These companies will remain on the front foot, and I think the data sales will be a little bit more exciting than people think. So I'm going to go with hot there, even though the rating looks fairly full and the price is fairly strong.